with perhaps for
lovely clear skies of late. The last few, I've done it now, haven't I? Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, that's it now.
The last few weeks have been just appalling. It's been windy. It's just been horrid. But we've had probably the last week and a bit. It's started to pick up, and the last few nights have been clear, and it's just wonderful to see stars again, and the sun, of course. That's quite nice.
Yeah, of course. You're over in Norfolk, aren't you?
Yes, that bump that everyone tends to kind of ignore, that on the sort of the right hand side of the country. Yeah,
and I'm right opposite you on the other side, and I noticed there's a big band of cloud coming over my bit, but it's not going over your bit. So you can keep on.
Yeah. Do you know, it's so unusual. Normally, if anyone's going to get cloud, we get it.
You'll be glad to know it's here all week as well.
Oh, right.
Over in your part of the world.
Oh well, yeah. We're on the North Welsh border. We're on the North Welsh border. We try to keep the clouds at bay, but they sneak over the border. It's only 4 miles. So Mark, obviously we'll have a chat with you about your world record attempt in a little while. But first of all, Ingenuity. What did you think about that today?
Oh, it's wonderful. Do you know, so I've got a drone, and it's the problems, the challenges that sometimes happen. I mean, I had a problem with my gimbal on my drone, and I ended up thinking, do you know what? I'm not going to pay the ridiculous amount of money to get it properly repaired. I'll fix it myself. And I'm pleased to say that I did manage to fix it myself, but there were ribbon cables everywhere, and I couldn't have done it if it had been on a planet somewhere else. And so, my palms felt sweaty for the engineers, thinking, if there's something physical goes wrong, there's nothing you can do about it. So just to see it was just wonderful. There's been so many days build up, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But to see it fly on another world, what was it, 118 years ago that we had our first powered flight on Earth, and here we are 118 years on, and we're flying stuff on other. I mean, that's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just unbelievable. I was doing an interview on one of the radio stations today, and somebody said, well, we got drones there now, we'll have McDonald's and they can deliver by drone. I know, it was an American, of course.
It would be.
Yeah. So Mark, before we will launch into what you're going to be attempting, can you give the listeners a little bit of a background about yourself? Because since we spoke to you last on Astro Radio, we've got a lot of new listeners, so obviously some people may not be aware of how you got into this game in the first place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I originally got into this when I saw Saturn when I was 10 years old, only about 15 years ago or so. And why are you all smirking? I saw Saturn through a telescope. And
I'm sorry for interrupting, Mark. You did mention Comet Cahootsec.
Yes, I did. You're right.
No, that wasn't 15 years ago. I'm sorry.
I'd only read about that. I've not actually seen it. I've just read about it in
the history books, of course. Yeah.
And so that got me passionate about astronomy. And I kind of got into doing media work, not by accident, but it was really an opportunity. I did a lot of work, as many people do, for local media. So my local BBC Norfolk radio and TV. I did a lot of work with them through the local astronomy society, the Norwich Astronomical Society, and that I was at the right place at the right time. I did some work, a very small piece of work for the Culture Show, the Channel 4, where they took a bunch of kids from London to Norfolk to try and infuse them in the world of science and astronomy. And from that, I got seen by producer of the One Show. And it's all kind of kicked off from there. So I ended up doing, I think, 4 or 5 years presenting science astronomy films for the One Show. Then I did Stargazing Live on the BBC for about another 4 or 5 years. And it's just been, more of the same, doing TV, doing radio, writing books, and even theatre shows to try and get people enthused generally about astronomy, but my theatre shows are more based on science to get kids interested in science. That's more about blowing things up and getting kids a little bit excited about it. But it's been a bit of a crazy world getting to where I am, but it was all about opportunity and mostly being in the right place at the right time.
I've always said that. I've said a lot of it. Obviously, you've even been in the right place at the right time. You're still going to have the right skills, Mark. You can't just
No, don't you?
You know.
Me.
Well, that's absolutely true.
Good as well. Yeah. But you do, and you have to look for those opportunities, and you have to work at them as well. And the world of media is full of competition and rejection. And, you know, I mean, I remember I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival a couple of years ago now. I'd driven to the Edinburgh Fringe, and Edinburgh is a long drive as well from Norfolk. It's a good sort of 8 hours or so drive. And I remember arriving at like 9 o'clock at night, and just literally just as I'd arrived at my flat, I got a phone call from the producers of Good Morning Britain wanting me to meet them in Glasgow the following morning at 6 o'clock to do a quick piece to camera about I forget what the story, I think it might have been when NASA introduced their space protection officer role. And, you know, at the time I was thinking, oh, you know, last thing I want to do is get up early to get to Glasgow for 6 o'clock. But if you don't do it, then they'll pick someone else to do it. And it, you know, you have to work. It sounds great and it sounds fabulous, but it's quite often a lot of inconvenience, really, because you've got to do things at really awkward times sometimes. But it, you know, that said, it is amazing fun, and it's quite an experience.
So we're going to come on to your world record event. So obviously, what are you going to be attempting, and what preparations have you had to make for this?
Yeah, so you know, every time I talk about this to people, I kind of find myself thinking, why did I agree to this? And some years ago, I got talked into doing a 24-hour lecture for raising money for Marie Curie, and so I did that. But that was a sort of a 45-minute lectures with a 15-minute break in between over a period of 24 hours. And I did it, you know, all the way through. Did it at the Royal Institution about 5 years ago now. And at the time, I thought I'll have a look and see what the world record is for the longest lecture. And when I learned it was 139 hours, 42 minutes and 56 seconds, which is over 5.5 days, I kicked a few expletives out in my head and thought, not a chance. I'm not going to be doing that. That is just crazy. So I did the 24-hour lecture, felt rubbish at the end of it. And then it's just been sitting there gnawing away at the back of my mind ever since. And so the plan is to attempt to break the Guinness World Record for the longest lecture by talking for 140 hours-ish at the University of East Anglia in Norwich in September. So I'll be starting at noon on September the 11th, and I can have breaks along the way, but I won't be stopping the lecture until the following Friday about 8 o'clock in the morning.
And is this going to be broadcast on YouTube and places like that?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of different facets to it. So we've got, I've teamed up with a bunch of research scientists at Cambridge University who are going to be monitoring me to understand how extreme sleep deprivation will affect human physiology and psychology. Because whilst I can have breaks, I'll be having 5-minute breaks every 2 hours. And then I'll also fit in, I think it's 3 90-minute sleeps throughout the entire event. So I'll get 4.5 hours of sleep over about 5.5 days. So I am going to be massively sleep deprived. So doing a little bit of science research out of it, I'm going to be wearing an EEG machine, a heart rate monitor, blood pressure, all that sort of thing. It's all going to be available online. The wonderful Rachel, who's on the screen in front of you, Rachel Riot, she's also pulling together some lesson plans so that we can get school kids involved in it as well. And the whole thing, as you say, is all going to be online. So it's going to be viewable through YouTube. I do need to have one audience member at all times in the lecture theatre. Otherwise, the whole event is failed. So that makes me a bit nervous. It takes it out of my hands. But yeah, the whole thing's going to be online. I'm doing it to raise as much money as possible for Barnardo's. So it's going to be a lot of work. As Rachel knows, and I'm sure she'll back me up, the preparation itself is a massive undertaking. Just, you know, I've got a team of 5 or 6 people working with me, including Rachel, to pull this all together. And there's a lot of work, from coordinating the volunteers to, you know, making sure the venue's all set up, the live streaming stuff works. It's a lot of work, and it feels like the lecture itself is the easy bit. Actually, the hard bit is all the preparation for it.
We'll be dipping in and out with Astro Radio and broadcasting snippets of it. And obviously we're going to be broadcasting the finale just to make sure that you get there, because we're not going to miss that. I
hope it's going to be really, I think as time progresses, it's going to be really interesting, because, you know, when you get, I've done a practice and a warm-up where I stayed awake for 60 hours and then I gave a 1-hour lecture.
Yeah.
And when I did that, you know, there were times when I was talking that I didn't hallucinate, but I just remember thinking that there was someone stood over there and there wasn't someone stood over there. And so seeing what's going to happen after, 100 hours is going to be really interesting. So broadcasting the last bit is going to be by far the more interesting, I think.
You'll be going around swatting flies along there with your fly swat and stuff like that. You're going completely bonkers.
Oh, you know what? I could be talking utter gibberish by the end of it.
Don't worry about that.
Who will know? Who will know?
We'll run with it. We'll just run with it.
Just humor it. It's all you've got to do.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do, we're going to go to a track, and then we'll come back and we'll have a little chat with Rachel as well as to what she's doing as far as the lesson plan goes. So, folks, we're going to be going back over to the chat in a minute, and I think this track kind of suits it really. It's Roy Orbison and I Drove All Night.
What a brilliant choice of music. Have you had those?
Lovely track as well. I like that one.
You'll get that with Pete.
With some of this with this event. So what are you going to be doing?
Yeah, well, as Mark said, a lot of the hard work, he's got a really good team around him that are doing a really good job, but I'm sort of helping to promote and push the educational side to get more children interested in science and to make them aware of sleep deprivation and the effects it has. So we've got a sort of a range of different activities that can hopefully, some can take part as the lecture's going on, some can take part sort of before, some can be used after, but a lot of wide things. We've got things sort of where children will be making predictions based on Mark's mental state.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah, that sounds really bad. That does.
That's one for everyone. Everyone can enjoy that one. We'll all guess what's going to happen to Mark as time goes on. We've got things based on sort of a psychomotor vigilance test. So that'll be checking his sort of sustained attention and reactions to speed and responding to things, so children can obviously again make predictions on what do they think is going to happen to those sort of reactions, how are things going to go. And again, these can be linked directly back to children staying up too late, playing Fortnite, playing games, going to school the next day or sitting exams, just how much that is going to reduce your attention. Things based on his body temperature. So obviously we're going to assume that his temperature will drop in the evening, it'll drop late into the night. Everything like that will make him more sleepy. So he'll have to battle that as well, which will be interesting. One we discussed was a change in his food preferences, because a lot of time when your body goes through sleep deprivation, your food preferences will change. So we're going to hopefully try and get Mark to do some quick 20 food items every sort of 6 hours as he goes, to see if his cravings or food needs change as he becomes more, can we use the word delirious?
It's easy.
I know we talked about, these aren't all completely firmed up yet. We talked about Mark loves a selfie. We said a lot of people rate age and attractiveness and trustworthiness based on facial health and appearance. So, will Mark become more unattractive as the evening goes on?
I can't imagine that happening.
Yeah, total troll.
That statement, is Mark going to become more unattractive as time goes on?
We'll go so many different directions, couldn't it? It could go all different directions.
It's going downhill now, I'll tell you.
Well, can't we get Brian Cox on with Mark and just watch out to them deteriorate?
Mark, are you sure you want Rachel involved in this?
I'm starting to think I might have to.
At this early stage, you're showing distinct signs of dislike.
I'm having to make some staff changes. I think have to be a bit of a reorganisation. I think.
Yeah, I would if I were you. Take my advice.
The one thing I would ask is, obviously, the perception of day and night. You naturally feel more tired as night falls, unless you're an astronomer, of course. But is the room going to have access to natural daylight, or is it going to be completely devoid of natural daylight?
The theatre that I'm in, so it's at the University of East Anglia, they've got a lecture theatre called the Thomas Paine Lecture Theatre. It's a fabulous venue, but there's no external light in the theatre. Now, people will be coming in and going out as I'm talking, so I will see a glimmer of light probably in the distance as people are coming in and out the door, but by and large, I don't think I'm going to get to see an awful lot of daylight. Saying that, there's actually where I'll be getting my sleep, there's like a small room to the side of the lecture theatre, and that does have windows, but the times I think I'm scheduled for sleep breaks is going to be at night time. So I don't think I'm going to see daylight for about 5 days, which is going to be that. And that makes me feel a bit kind of, oh my word, that's going to be weird. Really weird.
I was going to
after it all.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, do you think it's an advantage not seeing daylight or a disadvantage?
I must. Do you know what? That idea has cropped in my mind, and I've thought, is it a sensible thing to do to get someone to put like a daylight lamp somewhere when the sun comes up and then turn it off when it's gone down, so I can at least get a perception? I know a clock will tell me, but will it help me to have that cycling of day and night? And I, you know, at the moment, I just don't know. Frankly, I don't think anything's going to really help. And I could just nip up the back when I've got a 5-minute break and go and look out the window wistfully at the daylight and the birds and the lambs skipping in the field. You know, I might be able to do that just to get a feel for what's going on in the big wide world.
If you don't mind, Mark, I'm going to hand you over to our panel now to ask you a few questions, if that's all right.
Except Rachel, because she's mean.
Yeah, well, she's horrible. She just reckons you're going to deteriorate in all sorts of ways. And
but you know what? I must say, without her listening, she's right in that there is a theory that sleep deprivation does reduce your levels of attractiveness and you're healthy looking. And actually, one of the things the science crew want me to do is take a photograph. I think it's every 6 hours. So she is right, actually. Don't tell her I told you that, but she's right.
Will Mark become less attractive?
Fine, you didn't need to carry on, did you?
I think there's a lot in that, because Pete's been awake for 72 years.
He still looks good though for his age.
Hey, cut him off, mate. Cut him off.
Yeah, I was going to introduce a subject of basically what you're touching on there, the light deprivation. My son Mark, I was hoping to be have available for this meeting tonight, or for our as a guest. He suffers from a neurological condition called non-circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
It's abbreviated N24, and basically his body does not produce melatonin at the right time in the right amount of levels, and you can't compensate by taking melatonin even in small amounts. One of the things that we tend to take for granted is that as soon as that sun sets, the blue light level starts deteriorating, it starts dropping down, and then that kicks us into time to go to sleep, going back to caveman times and whatever. And in the early hours, the light breaks and the blue light starts coming up again, and it switches our brain to say, okay, let's get the melatonin back up again, and time to wake up. And we just do that naturally. UV hits our skins, auto detects. With my son, that doesn't happen. So what happens with him is that he can be awake literally for 38 hours. And as you say, you can hallucinate. It is a method of torture. In some countries, it's been a method of torture, and sleep deprivation will cause terrible things. And he did hallucinate after 3 days of no sleep. Now, you can't make yourself sleep. Your body says, I am tired, but you can't just curl up and go asleep, because it doesn't work. Your brain, your chemicals aren't working. And he's tried many methods. And sorry, Mark, I was just going to say, light boxes that give off the UV, the blue light level, I think it's 4,000 Kelvin or thereabouts, that produces blue light, which keeps you awake. So kids who go on the computer at 10 o'clock at night don't realize that that blue light coming off the computer or the mobile phone is keeping you awake. It's also triggering the brain to mess around with the cycle. What you can do with your computer and your mobile phone is change the color temperature.
Yeah,
that's the right way of using mobile phones. But yeah, I'd say get some daylight by the light source, even if it's just for that period of time when the sun sets. Maybe reduce the light level down. I don't think that's cheating. I think that's fair.
Well, it's not. Yeah, absolutely, it's not cheating. But I mean, you picked up on a really interesting point around the whole circadian rhythm, which is where you're right. You get the melatonin. Builds up in your body, which makes your brain gets that signal that it's time to sleep. And it's interesting that we all have a different circadian rhythm. I think it's roughly 30% of the population, 33.3% of the population are naturally night owls. 33% are naturally morning larks, so they get up earlier. Naturally, they tend to wake up early, and then the rest is a bit of a mixture of the two. But if you're wired in as being a night owl or a morning lark, you can't choose to sleep at a different time of day. Your body dictates your circadian rhythm dictates when you sleep. And so it's interesting that society actually precludes 33% of the population from being fit and healthy, because all those night owls, like probably a lot of us astronomers, everyone has to get up for work and school and all the other things you have to get up for, but actually night owls naturally will wake up 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. But society dictates that you have to be up earlier than that. And so actually night owls generally are all sleep deprived without even starting to have poor
it's a vast subject in itself. Non-sighted people suffer from non-circadian rhythm, as do sighted people as well. It's not really known that much, or it wasn't known that much in sighted people until the age of social media, because now there's groups. So one of the psychological problems that my son had was he thought he was the only person who was suffering from this. It affected his work. It's affected his social life in a terrible way. In fact, the last year has been great for him, because all around the world there's somebody who's willing to go on Zoom and have a chat. So that's been a good thing. But the actual the deprivation of social contact has been awful. What we have suffered as lockdown fever, he has suffered since the age of 11.
Wow.
And it's something that he can't explain. You've got to experience it, and we can't experience it because we're not in that situation. It is a terrible thing, but it's sort of it's one of these disabilities that's not visible.
Yeah.
So
you're
people
right,
think,
Dave, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
So
suffered for years.
Oh, right, yeah. So
I take a supplement which fortunately has fixed it for me, but I suffered for about 25 years. I take a herbal remedy, 5-HTP, and I've been very lucky. They didn't think it would fix it, but it has for me. I used to sleep no more than 2 hours a night. It was
Just before I pass it over to the rest of the team, what I was going to say was that the sleep cycle is what we consider now as 8 hours sleep as a good period of sleep is artificial, because that's come from the Victorian era, Victorian Edwardian Victorian, is it? Basically, people work. We used to work in the fields. We used to go hunting way thousands of years ago, and then the industrial age, we're out in the fields, agricultural side of things. So we're working in those August nights when the moon is high. We work out and do the harvest. We're in the summertime, we can work longer hours because the longer periods of sunlight. But in the wintertime, you don't have that luxury, depending on your latitude, of course, on the Earth. So our human cycle is actually it's like sunset. We go to sleep, but we wake up naturally around what we on our clock we'd call 2 a.m. in the morning, and we'd be awake for 2 hours. In Victorian times, this is what you'd do. You'd actually be awake at 2 in the morning for 2 hours, and then go back to sleep again to get up again a couple of hours later to go to work and go and clean the chimneys or go and do the upstairs downstairs routine. That is something that's going to be interesting with the feedback on the science of monitoring, what you're going to go through, and see if you get these peaks. But it's there's a lot more to it than just trying to keep awake. It's a fascinating subject. Sleep labs are out there in the UK. I know sleep apnea is a thing where you can nod off, and you could even pass. Your heart will stop if you don't wake up quickly. This N24 is a different thing altogether.
Well,
it's a subject in itself. So let's pass it over to Peter. Sorry, Peter.
What I was going to ask is, I listening to that conversation, are you allowed to take any kind of supplements to keep you awake, or is this got to be done naturally?
I can. However, everybody that I've spoken to in the world of medicine is actually advised against it. So, there are things you can actually do more harm. At least I can do more harm by taking supplements. People think that caffeine is a good thing to take to keep to keep me wired, but actually caffeine is a bit like a dam, and so you get this thing called sleep pressure, which builds up and it builds up throughout the day. And then if you have caffeine, it effectively blocks that sleep pressure from getting to your brain to tell you to go to sleep. And if you keep blocking it and keep blocking up, actually that can build up to quite dangerous levels of chemicals in the brain, and that can cause you problems. So it really is a case of natural processes, natural remedies. I can have the odd coffee. So one thing I might do is have a coffee before I go for my 90-minute sleep, which will get me into, it will just start to get me into it'll start getting into my system for when I wake up, which will hopefully get me over that feeling of sleep inertia, where you'll wake up and you're a bit a bit groggy from waking up. And that's, I'm worried actually about sleep inertia, because that's going to be one of the hardest parts for me to overcome. When I'm talking and when I'm awake, I can keep going, but it's that waking up after 90 minutes, having been awake for 40 hours, and then trying to get going again. That's going to be a real challenge, and that's what shaped the 3 sleeps only rather than more sleeps of shorter duration. Is that every time I wake up, I'm going to suffer with sleep inertia, and that's going to be hard work.
Yeah. If we get a moment, I'll come back to that 90-minute cycle, because that's a very interesting point in itself. Daz, you got your hand up. Have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Mark. I watched quite a lot of your 24-hour talk that you did in preparation for this when you were at Norwich and all that. And I did text you sometimes, email you during the night just to keep you going in that thing. But you also said that because of course you're talking about your voice. And you also said you've done some exercises. Can you just explain those, please?
Yeah, and I would demonstrate it, but I can't find the straw. So there's the one thing that I found which is really, really beneficial is called straw singing. And I would give you a demonstration. Perhaps during the next break, I'll see if I can find the straw that I use. And what happens if you talk a lot, effectively your vocal cords, they kind of slap together. And the more you talk, the more sort of inflamed they can get, and the more they can almost get stuck together. And what you need to do is separate them out to get a layer of air between the vocal cords again to keep them capable of optimally performing. And what you do is you literally put a straw in your mouth, you seal your lips around the straw, and you just kind of go up and down the scales. And if you do that, and when I did the 24-hour lecture, I think I did 1.5 hour bouts of talking followed by a 5-minute break. And I did the whole straw singing thing every 5 minutes, every time I had 1.5 hours after 1.5 hours talking. And it increases the pressure in your mouth and in your lungs, and that forces air through your vocal cords. And at the end of it, having talked pretty much constantly for 24 hours, my voice felt absolutely fine.
Okay.
Contrasted to when I did the 24-hour lecture 5 years ago, when I had 15-minute breaks every hour. When I did that, my voice felt like nothing on earth. But doing the straw singing made a huge difference. And anyone who works where they talk a lot for their work, sometimes you feel like your voice is getting a bit weak. And all you need to do literally is just a straw, a straw from the grocery shop will do. Just literally put that in your mouth and whiz up and down the scales a few times, and you'll feel your voice kind of loosen up, and it works wonders.
Did you have any sort of like voice coaching as well? How to?
Yeah, not for the 24-hour session, but I have teamed up with a vocal coach for this 140 hours, because that's a different kettle of fish. So I've actually got my first session with them on Friday, so I'll be gleaning as much out of them as I can.
Excellent. Just one more question, and it's actually for Rachel. Rachel, you said you're going to be measuring Mark's core temperature. Where's the thermometer going to go?
Yeah, Rachel.
Wherever Mark's comfortable with.
He's going to be standing up, I assume. So
as long as he doesn't get them mixed up with the straw, we'll be okay.
The thermometer we've got, Baz, just to give you context, the thermometer we've got is about that big. This is my beard moisturizer. Many other brands are available, I should say. It's about that big, and it ain't going anywhere internal.
Oh dear!
Just don't fall asleep.
My eyes are watering now.
Go on, Keith.
Yeah, following on from that remark about the thermometer, do you have to keep talking through the toilet breaks as well? And do we get audio-visual aids?
Well, do you know what? I'm still in a number of different places. I've not applied. Good question, Keith. But I've not applied a lot of thought to the toilet situation. Now, if everything's performing to clockwork, then I can utilize the 5-minute breaks, and I shouldn't need to carry on talking through them. I had thought maybe I'll stick a portaloo on the side of the stage, so I can just go in there and just keep talking and keep performing. As long as I don't stop talking for more than 30 seconds at a time, because when it's more than 30 seconds, that's counted as one of those breaks, I'll be okay. But the other alternative, of course, is adult nappies. And I'm just thinking, I might just pop a pair of those bad boys on. And that will just
I was supplying you with the catheters, Mark.
Oh yeah.
Catheters are painful.
I work in urology. I can get you loads.
It's gonna hurt though, isn't it? I don't know if I like the sound of that.
No, Mark,
either.
Mark, are you
Have
sure you
bottles.
really want to do this? Are you sure you really want to do this?
I was okay with nappies. I think I was okay with that, but then they started talking about catheters. Nappies are just a backup.
Mark, can I just ask you? What we haven't touched on is what you're actually going to be talking about.
Space stuff.
Well, yeah. So
everything. So
everything.
Everything. So what? I mean, many of you guys, I'm sure, have given public lectures, astronomy lectures to various different groups. Normally, if it's like an hour long, it's really difficult to work out what to put in, isn't it? Because it's only an hour, and you haven't got all that time.
Yeah.
I've got 140 hours, so I'm talking about everything I can possibly think of. So it covers, I think it covers all the planets in the solar systems individually, of course, for a couple of hours. It covers space exploration. I've got about 6 space missions I'm going to be talking about in some depth. It covers. I might touch on astrology if there's time.
Whoa, come on now, Mark. You're doing well up to that point.
Especially with the BBC.
Yeah, mind your language now. Come on.
So yeah, I'm going to be talking about absolutely everything, and it's quite nice to not have to worry about leaving things out. But the challenge, of course, is making sure that I don't repeat myself, because what I could do, the rules of the record are that I could do a 24-hour lecture and just keep repeating it every day.
I was going to ask you if you're allowed to repeat stuff.
Well, you can, but that feels like a cheat. So I have constructed a lecture which I think will last about 140 hours. But trying to get a 1-hour lecture finished bang on the right number of minutes, I can do that. But if you're doing that hour after hours, I'm getting more and more sleep deprived. That's going to become really, really difficult. So essentially, all I'm doing is I've constructed what I think is a 140-hour lecture. And if I get to the end of it and I've still got 5 hours to go, I'll just start again, and I'll just start working through it again. But it's been constructed so that I don't repeat it.
You have to remember everything, or have you got all your presentations in front of you of what you're going to do?
Sonia, I've never been one for notes, really. I use slides for notes. So if I need aid memoirs, then I'll stick the odd note up on the slide. So if there's a number, like a measurement or distance or something, I'll stick it on the slide as a nice graphic for people to pick up. I don't put loads and loads of words on. I hate that. But I've never lectured with notes. So yeah, by and large, I'm going to have to kind of, and I've done this sort of thing for quite a lot of years, so I'm fairly okay that I know most of the things I'm going to talk about. The concern is that as I go more and more gaga, as time progresses, can I remember it all? So I will have notes, of course, prepared, and I will have notes on the slides just in case I need them. But by and large, I'm just kind of hoping I don't need to refer to them.
Right.
Hoping.
Okay, well, I think we're going for a quick break.
Yeah.
And if Mark wants to go and get a straw and give us a little tune, that'd be good.
Well, stand by.
Okay, we'll be going back over to the chat in a little while. And in the meantime, folks out there, we're going to have Roxette and another sleep track, Sleeping in My Car.
Hey, Peter, sleep and...
Okay, guys, away you go.
Can I just say thank you? That's very kind of you, and I really, really appreciate that. That's very, very kind.
No problem at all. We'll make that. We'll publicise that closer to the event so that people know that if they do make a donation to Astro Radio during that period that you're on stage, and even in your toilet breaks and your sleeping breaks, the donations will still come to you.
As long as they wash first, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay, should we open up? Roger, any questions for Mark regarding his challenge that he has ahead of him?
Will you be having any energy drinks?
No. So again, Roger, I think with energy drinks, they've got caffeine and all sorts of other stuff in them. So it's one of those things that it's actually not advised that I have anything like energy drinks, because it will act as a sort of a blocker for the slow build up of sleep pressure. And actually, that's the last thing I want to do. Otherwise, you do end up getting that massive, great crash afterwards. So actually, it's going to be detrimental to have energy drinks. I say that now, of course, I might get 132 hours in and think, just give me a Red Bull, give me something to keep me going for those last few hours. The plan is not to have any, but let's just see what happens as the event progresses. Best laid plans and all that.
Can I just ask you, Mark? I presume that a representative of the Guinness Book of Records has got to be there at all times as well.
No, not at all, actually. So
really,
they can be, but it will cost an arm and a leg for 140 hours. You have to pay for a Guinness representative. So what's happening? Part of the mammoth amount of organising that Georgina, my wonderful events organizer, is having to do is pull together a rota of witnesses, all of whom have got to be there. Not all of them. They've got to be there on a 4-hour rota basis, and it's their job to keep a log of everything. Every time I stop for a break, every time I stop for sleep, make a note and keep an eye on the audience members coming and going, and the whole lot. All of their log entries will get sent over to Guinness, along with film of the whole thing, which will enable them to sort of spot check different events throughout the period of time, just to make sure that they've captured it appropriately. So it's a mammoth. There's this whole list of things that have got to be done to support the event, and it's quite a lot to work through.
Because I think perhaps what you needed to keep you going was a couple of Guinnesses. So
I think I'll need more than that towards the end of it. But again, if I get close to the end, then whether it's sort of drinky times or not, I'll just be having a beer to keep me going, I think.
Oh, and lastly, for me, perhaps for the benefit of our listeners in other countries, you might explain a little bit about what Barnardo's is and what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. So Barnardo's is, it's a wonderful charity. I've been involved with them for quite a few years now, and it's a charity that gets involved in helping out underprivileged kids, chiefly in the United Kingdom. And kids are, they're such an important part of society, and they get involved in some really quite hard-hitting issues. It's not just about kids who perhaps can't get a good education or the more run-of-the-mill stuff, but they get involved in child sex abuse and all sorts of really horrible things that many of us just don't really acknowledge that go on. And when you think that sort of thing happens to kids, it's heartbreaking. So it's all about raising as much as I possibly can for Barnardo's.
Good for you. I mean, I know how it goes. My sister's a foster parent, and some of the stories that she has to deal with are just unbelievable. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. And this last year and a half or so of the pandemic have had a massive impact, not just on the NHS, because the NHS and health organisations across the world have lost out on money, of course, but because the governments have quite often supported the health services, but it's all the other charities that do a lot of really important work, and they've just lost out on so much income through a lack of fundraising because no one's been able to go out and do any. So yeah, it's really nice to be able to do my little bit to help them out.
Good for you.
Thanks for that one, Andy. Rachel, as one of the team members with Mark, you've already dug yourself in a big hole by saying he's not going to be as attractive 48 hours, 56 hours and so on. Dig yourself out that hole. What have you got to ask?
Didn't
Rachel.
Anyway,
I know you didn't. No. Big spoon. You meant to. You didn't say, but you meant to.
I'll be checking back on the record.
It was written on your face, Rachel. I'm sorry.
I don't think we've discussed this. Obviously, I don't get to come to all the meetings because I can't come during work hours and things like that. But what content is happening during your sleeps? What is it just a break for everybody, or is something on whilst you're sleeping? What's going on for sort of the audience during those times?
At this stage, I mean, the audience don't have to be here, or the audience don't have to be there when I'm asleep. So the audience members in the theatre haven't got to actually be sat in the audience while I'm nodding off somewhere, which is good because they can get bored for 90 minutes. So at the moment, we might put something on, but we've not really planned it to that degree yet. I think at the moment, it's more likely to be just a holding slide that's going to come back in an hour and a half time, and it'll hopefully be awake and carry on again. But we'll probably try and do something, more for people that are online, so they can keep something ticking along on their screens.
Get a magician.
What I think we perhaps might do is we just get Rachel to do something instead while I'm sleeping.
Yeah, that's an idea.
I
pay money to do that.
Perhaps a little bit of. Perhaps you could play a tune on a straw, maybe.
Yes, I think Mark's got a straw to show us.
Talking of that, Mark, let's hear it. Let's have a tune.
So this is you can buy very expensive. I can't really call them singing straws or something like that. This is just a piece of fish tank PVC tubing.
Hope you washed it first.
I haven't used this piece. It was
okay, all right.
I wouldn't use an old piece. And literally all you do is you just pop it in your mouth, keep the jokes clean, and you just do this. You go.
You're literally pretending to be a cow.
No, that's hang on.
Oh no, that's a cow.
Cow impression, isn't it? You're all a little bit impressed with that, aren't you? This
It's
is
whale. It's whale
not
song.
being sleep deprived either. Yes, you just do that, and there's other kind of tones and patterns of tones that you can do that just keep forcing your vocal cords apart, and it works wonders. And it's just a bit of blooming PVC fish tank pipe. If it is an old one, don't suck whatever you do, or you'll get bits of water in it there.
I've just had a message in from Tien in Japan, and he said he's at work at the moment, and he said all the folks at Hibino Electronics in Tokyo is going to be supporting you on this one.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate it. I can't what's the time difference there? Because it'll be nice to know that there are people.
It's at the moment it's 5 to 5 in the morning on Tuesday morning. He works on security. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you guys will be there in the wee small hours when all my friends over in England will be fast asleep. It will be lovely to know that you guys are there cheering on. And I may well be asleep as well. Who knows?
Stefan in Moscow says he'll be rooting for you as well.
Brilliant. That's wonderful. Thank you, Stefan. Appreciate that.
More near home, we got Derek from Liverpool AS. He's going to be watching with great enthusiasm as much as he can. He's looking forward to it.
I hope someone tries to stick it out all the way through. That would be wonderful.
What, for 5.5 days?
Yeah, why not?
Why not?
When I did my 24-hour lecture, there were, this was the first one when I did at the Royal Institution in London. The first one, there was a couple of ladies who stayed in the theatre for the entire attempt. And they were awake for the entire attempt. I couldn't stay awake in a lecture theatre, no matter who was talking for that length of time without nodding off.
Were they knitting while you were doing that?
Do you know, I don't think they were, Roger. I don't think they would, but that would be a wonderful thing to do, wouldn't it? See if they can knit a cardigan in the time I can complete my talk.
A blanket to tuck you in, maybe.
Maybe you should invite them along then for this record attempt with a long blanket for when you go to sleep.
I don't know who they were.
You sure they hadn't passed away?
Oh, Dad.
You can't say that.
They just fell asleep for an hour. Come on, let's have another question. Come on, folks.
Well, I was wondering, Mark.
Hang on, Andy, you've had your question.
Sorry.
Come on. Jump in the queue, you jumping cute jumper, you. Come on, Kath.
You jumper.
I was just wanting to ask, I mean, obviously, I think you've both mentioned about food, but have you got a plan of the food? Have you spoke to a nutritionist, and have they suggested things that are good, like bananas and stuff that are good slow release foods?
Yeah, so again, I've got a nutritionist who is going to be working with me over the next 6 months to pull together a nutrition plan for the event. When I did the 60-hour thing, so for the Norwich Science Festival 2 years just over a year ago now, one of the things I did was I stayed awake for 60 hours and then did a 1 hour lecture to see if I had the rough capability to survive the thing. Yeah. And some of the foodstuffs I think I had cheese, carrots and bananas, I think were from memory. I can't remember why carrots, but I'm sure carrots were recommended food stuff. To keep
bananas,
you going.
definitely, yeah.
Definitely bananas, yeah.
Potassium, reserve energy.
I think peanut butter's quite
I hate peanut butter. Don't make me eat that.
Peanut butter and
Rachel, make him eat it.
Sandwiches.
This is Captain Rachel, who also recommends chocolate and gin.
Gin, definitely.
Whoa, hang on, rewind. What was that? You recommend chocolate and what?
Chocolate and gin.
Gin. I'll tell you what is nice. This is something you can all try across the world, be it Japan or be it Moscow. Strawberry instant whip, which is like a strawberry mousse with, if you're ready for this will get all your taste buds tingling, I promise you, smoky bacon crisps.
Oh,
really?
Yes.
It's just a combination. But is it no different than cheese and apple and sweet and sour? Yeah.
Crumble or break up your bacon crisps in the strawberry mousse or instant whip, and you just
Rachel's not looking happy here.
I'm not convinced on that one.
No, I'm kind of feeling I've got to try that now. Just to
see, yeah.
Let's just check the calendar, shall we? April the what?
No,
seriously.
It's not the first. That's okay.
This is straight out of Heston Blumenthal's cookbook, isn't it? I mean,
It sounds like, doesn't it?
Gordon Ramsay will be knocking the end of the night before
he will.
Maybe you should have that on your last hours, Mark, and people may think you've gone mad on screen.
That's it, yeah. He's delirious. He's gone crazy.
Yeah, Rachel, we need to sit down
bacon and strawberry mousse.
If we do this food thing, Rachel, we'll have to fit in strawberry mousse and bacon crisps.
I'll put it on the list.
Okay, Simon, any food recommendations? Any questions?
Not really, but I wonder if it's like running. Are you actually expecting to hit a wall at some point, or is it just a general degradation that you think?
I think it's going to be a general degradation. Saying that sleep deprivation is your body goes up and down, and there will be sort of the early morning hours, the 3 o'clock in the morning, when my body temperature from the thermometer the inserted, my body temperature is going to drop throughout the 24-hour period, and when I hit those points, it's going to be harder than when my body temperature is back up again. So through the good old circadian rhythm, as that continues doing its thing, I will go through peaks and troughs of feeling okay, and then it'll get harder. But I think the troughs will get harder and harder as I progress through it and the sleep pressure builds up.
I'll just say hi to Julian, who's just joined the chat. Hi, Julian.
Hi, Julian.
Oh, hello. Hello,
Julian.
Julian, have you got any cake recipes that could help Mark through this?
It's got to be legal ingredients as well.
It's got to have crisps in it.
Yeah, it's got to be smoky bacon.
Instant whip.
Wow.
I'm hurt. Quite frankly, I'm hurt at the lack of support for the strawberry instant whip.
Mark, I'm from Liverpool.
We've got to see you eat it first before we are convinced.
Absolutely.
Mark, I'm only jealous because we definitely can't buy smoky bacon crisps here in Spain. So I want to try this desperately, but I will try it at the next opportunity because I think that could be a winner.
But you can get frazzles, can you?
Yeah,
frazzles are the same
nothing like that.
Yeah,
I think I'd probably use cheese and onion, and they'd be just as fine.
But how about if you substituted the bacon and onion?
Bacon and onion? What are you on about?
Where are you getting that from?
Smoky bacon crisps with pork scratchings, but the proper ones with hairs still on them.
I could tell you a story about that, but I'm not too sure whether I should on the air.
Oh, I love pork scratchings.
Probably not.
It's actually clean. Pork scratchings. We all know what pork scratchings are. The last time I ate a pork scratching was back in 1980s. I was in the pub, had a pint, took a pork scratching out. I got a good 3/4 through the bag, really enjoyed them. And I took one out, and as you say, there was a hair on the pork scratching, and it was a nipple. That is it. I haven't touched the pork. I haven't touched the pork scratching.
So did you say nibble?
It was a nibble, yeah. it was a nibble. I just thought that just totally put me off.
How could you tell what it was, Dave?
He's used to them.
I work in a hospital. I'm a father.
If you go down, if you go to the butchers in the Black Country, you can still get the genuine pork scratchings with the hair still on them. It's like they've just ripped the skin off the pig and fried it. I love it.
Last time I had a pork scratching, somebody had to give me the Heimlich maneuver, and that's a true story.
I just want to apologise to the vegetarians out there.
Yeah, I love pork scratchings, but they do this brand of pork scratchings in a bag in Spain, and they are so dry that they stick to the back of your throat like concrete. And I had one lodged at the back of my throat that wasn't moving, and I was turning blue, and somebody had to give me the Heimlich maneuver. But luckily it came up, but unfortunately so did the several pints of beer that I drank that night as well.
I've had a similar experience where I got a piece of pork scratching that kind of got stuck awkwardly at the back of my mouth, and it cuts inside the mouth. But I managed to get some ointment.
Do what he did there, the joke.
Coat.
So what's that, some porkies?
Can you just trot off now? Come on.
Yeah.
Everyone's on form tonight.
He's got his snout in the trough.
One of the Black Country newspapers carried an article about a chef who cured his diabetes by switching to a diet consisting entirely of pork scratchings, but I don't know if it's true.
I'm not sure it works like
well,
that.
How's his cholesterol?
Salt intake.
Yeah.
We used to live in, well, we had a flat in Germany for quite a while, and a couple of our friends went in Germany. They're quite well-to-do Germans, and they took us to this really exclusive restaurant one night, and they said, "We are going to show you this delicacy that is on the table." And he says, "You will not."
Was he from Wales, Peter?
Yeah, that's right.
I thought so. Yeah.
Where were they from?
And he said, we're going to show you this delicacy we have here in Germany in high-class restaurants. And they bought, honestly, a bowl of pork scratchings out and put it in the middle of the table. And I thought they were joking, and it was serious. In a high-class German restaurant, a little nibble you have that they consider a delicacy before a meal is a bowl of
And did they
pork
have the hairs on it
scratchings.
as well?
No, these didn't have hairs on. They'd shaved
selected pig parts.
I bet Mark didn't expect to be talking about pork scratchings tonight. Did he?
Especially with hairs on them as well.
That's the wonder of astronomy.
Before we get back onto sleep deprivation and whatever,
Yeah.
I'm just going to finish on the pork stories without going into any detail, other than saying lamb's fries.
What?
No, right? All blank looks on your faces. There's a challenge for you. Find out what lamb's fries are. My dad loved them. He used to fry them in a frying pan. That's it. I'm not going to mention anything more about them because it brings tears to my eyes.
I can guess what they are. Yeah.
I'm going to guess it's testicles.
I wasn't going to mention that. There we go. Apparently a delicacy. Yeah. Well, my father loved them anyway. My mother used to, well, I wouldn't say, but mother make jokes about them. I was only a little lad.
No, it's not.
So let's get back to Mark. Mark, sleep inertia. You've mentioned this in the past.
Yes.
What exactly is sleep inertia?
Well,
It
so
sounds like
sleep inertia, and sleep inertia is something we all experience when you get out of bed in the morning. It's that sort of drowsy feeling that you've got, and it takes you a while to get going. And one of the things that I've had to think very carefully about is how I deal with the sleeps that I can take during the world record attempt, because if I have a lot of sleeps, I could have lots of short naps throughout the whole event. But if I do that, of course, every time I go to sleep, then I'm going to have a corresponding moment of sleep inertia. And it's really hard to get through sleep inertia. And so we've kind of struck a balance on having 3 sleeps rather than 6 or 7 or 8 sleeps, because it first of all, it gives me a fairly good chance at trying to get a full 90-minute cycle of sleep in. But it also reduces the number of attempt or number of moments where I've got to try and get through that sleep inertia. And that's hard, and it is going to be hard. I know it's like in the morning when I get up after a decent night's sleep, even that's hard. Coming out of a 90-minute sleep, having been talking for perhaps 120 hours, and just having about 3 hours sleep, it's going to be really difficult. So that's probably, of all the things that worry me in the whole attempt, apart from my voice being able to keep going for that length of time, I think one of my bigger worries is actually about getting going again once I've woken up.
Yeah. I just had a thought.
No, so keeping talking is one thing, and you can kind of, the adrenaline will keep you going. But once you've switched off and you've gone to sleep, and it's that getting going.
That moment, isn't it? And let's get back into me. I made a joke before off about me and Andy. We could talk for 5 days, no problem at all. It's stopping us. Yeah, well, we do, but it's stopping us is the hard part. We just don't stop. Seriously,
What's stopping? I don't understand.
We don't know. There's no stop. Serious note.
I did actually, Dave. I did actually. I was teaching a group of bankers, and I mean that in the literal sense. I was teaching them advanced spreadsheet
9 o'clock.
programming.
Who cares? No,
I was teaching them advanced spreadsheet programming, and it was a 2-day course. And I hadn't slept for 48 hours beforehand, not at all. And the first day was fine, but I got towards the end of it, and then they were all staring at me, and I said, "What's the problem?" They said, "You've just been talking complete gibberish." And I'd just been talking nonsense without even realizing it. So be careful of that one, Mark, because that's.
I'm sure it's going to happen. When I did when I did the 60-hour staying awake and then do a 1-hour lecture a couple of years ago, I was talking about evolution of stars, and instead of talking about hydrogen and helium, I ended up talking about hydrogen. And then,
I remember that.
A new element.
I did manage to correct myself, but it took me a couple of minutes before I realised what I'd said. It doesn't sound right. Hydrogen, that's not right. Oh no, I know what it is, and I'd worked out what I did wrong. But it's easy to do, though, isn't it? It's easy to do.
It is easy, yeah.
It's so easy to do. It
Can
just
I
makes you realise when you do these lectures, and I've been there as well, how much concentration you're putting into it. Mentally, it's it's you're using a lot of your sensory powers just to keep on target and say exactly what you mean to say, and look at the visuals, and it's it is wearing. So that's why I think you're doing a wonderful thing.
I haven't done it yet. The challenge, and because when you talk, you are sort of a few minutes ahead, aren't you? You do talk, and your head and in your mind, you are thinking a few minutes ahead of where you actually are in the lecture. And I think it's when I did the 24-hour lecture recently, there were moments where I think I'd lost that moment where I was just a little bit ahead of myself, and I knew where I was going with the conversation or with the statement.
Sure.
And I think that there were a few minutes, and I'm sure, Rachel, I remember you telling me that there were a couple of moments where she could tell that I had gone not into ramble mode, but you could just about tell I was starting to lose focus on the direction that I was going. Was that right, Rachel? You would have probably said it.
I think it was when you said nobulosity.
Nobulosity. I never said that. No, did I?
That's a good one.
Are we back to your lamb fries, Dave?
Well, you're not far off there, are you? You're in the right direction. Yeah. I'll just say, I might as well say about it. My mother was frying up lamb's fries, which happened to be lamb's testicles, whatever. It brings tears to my eyes just thinking about it. My dad used to love them. It was
not as much as it does to theirs.
Well, the poor little lamb didn't worry about it anymore. But these had gone off, and the smell is awful. But I can't say the smell is awful. That's another thing, isn't it? That's a different joke. But yeah, that's what lamb's fries are. But anyhow, let's move on. Kath, you, I think, had your hand up there for a moment.
Yeah, I was only going to make a suggestion, because I've had a lot of problems with my voice in years gone by with laryngitis and things. And I don't know if it'll be a good thing for you or not, but glycerin and lemon is what I gargled with frequently. And I'm just thinking, if your vocal cords were struggling, some people add honey to it, but I found the honey made me cough. But just the glycerin and the lemon in some like lukewarm water, it really used, because the job I used to do, I had to talk to people all the time. And when I had laryngitis, it kept coming and going, but that would fix it. So it might be worth you having it on standby. That's my little tip for you.
And it's a good tip, Kath. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, there are tea bags, and I've got a whole box of tea bags which have got a mixture of honey and lemon and a few other different sort of natural ingredients, herbal teas, which do just keep your voice lubricated. I haven't got glycerin in them, but I'll certainly bear that one in mind. But one of the things quite interesting is that warm water or lukewarm water is much better for you than cold water, because cold water shocks and constricts the blood vessels, and actually that's a bad thing. So if you are doing a lot of talking, cold water is really bad for you. Actually, you want something that's just kind of lukewarm and almost at body temperature.
Yeah.
Mark, have you considered that you might?
We need to go to the track, Andy. Sorry, mate.
Oh, it's okay.
That's what we've got to practice the 5-minute breaks for Mark as well. You see.
Yes, of course.
So okay, let's go for the track and then.
Okay, well, we'll be coming back to the chat in a minute, and we'll be coming back into the chat with Andy with a question. And so we're going to play this for Rachel, who has requested it. And I think, again, this is, it's apt. Enter Sandman, Metallica.
I've just found the chat.
Listeners, so if you want to let Andy have his question first, and then we'll go over to the questions from the listeners.
Thanks, okay, Andy, fire away.
Thanks, Dave. Mark, I was just wondering, do you have any contingency plans for if you have things like power cuts? I mean, let's hope you don't, but if you had a power cut, for example, and you don't have your slides and things like this, have you got any contingency plans for things like that?
Not a lot. It's a simple answer. I mean, one problem with it is that the whole event has got to be filmed. So there's two elements. There's the Guinness World Record attempts, and then there's the live streaming bit. Now, if the cameras which are live streaming it fail, it's not a major issue to try and get them back up and running again. But if the cameras which are filming it to record it, and they'll be hooked up to computers, fail, and the recording fails, we'll have two cameras running with two computers, so we've got redundancy built in. Now, I don't believe the lecture theatre has got much of hasn't got a generator. There's a UPS there, so it can keep going for an hour or so. But that's really there just to make sure computers and devices can be shut down safely. So to be honest, if there is a power failure through the event, that's pretty much it. There's not a lot I can really do about it if the power fails, which if I'm 138 hours in,
that's not going to be good, is it?
I'm going to be a bit narked, I think, if there's a
I wonder in that eventuality if you would say to yourself, right, that's it, I'm not doing it again, or you would actually do it again. That would be interesting.
Oh God, it depends how far I get through it all, doesn't it? It depends on
if it did happen at the, in the last couple of hours, that would be dreadful. What decisions to have to make?
Yeah, and equally, if I get to 138 hours in, let's say, and I've had all my allotted breaks that I'm allowed, and then I have a moment where I just kind of blank out and I stop talking for 30 seconds, and then that becomes too many breaks, and then I fail the attempt, and that's just, oh yeah, would I do it if I fail? It's a real possibility that I don't succeed. Would I try it again? Yeah, I think I probably would. I think I would. Not straight away though. I think I'd give it a few years before I tried again.
Good for you. We've got to think of the children.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's quite right. Yeah.
If say, for instance, there was a power, it's all right. I wasn't listening completely to that. I was sorting out some next listeners' questions. If there was a power cut towards the end, would it be legally okay for somebody to shine a torch on you so you could keep going and record it with a mobile phone?
Honest answer, I don't know. I think as long as there's enough of a cutover, then yes, I think it would probably be okay, because one of the things that's going to be visible on the live stream is a clock. So the records from the witnesses will mark time against the clock, which is visible in the film. So as long as that clock, when that clock's going to be running off some Raspberry Pis, so and they can have battery backups, that's absolutely fine. They'll be attached to TV screens. They won't necessarily have battery backups. So there's a lot of different elements that if the power fails, it might just kick it into touch.
And as far as you're going into a blank mode, if you go into lockdown in your head, have you got people there that can kind of say, come on, you've gone quiet for 15, 20 seconds, speak?
Yeah. So we've got a bunch of people that we've called Mark's carers. And their purpose is to make sure I start talking after the 5-minute breaks are up, and I don't sort of make it 6 minutes and then start causing problems for myself further down the line. But it's also for safety purposes. Now, we're engaging with some medical professionals to identify some thresholds of behaviours or blood pressure, body temperature, whatever. All these things are going to be monitored, and it's just like if you're drunk. If you're drunk, your self-awareness of what you're capable of doing and how safe you are goes right out the window. That's why people get in the car and drink and drive, because they don't believe they're dangerous to anyone. And in the same way, when you get sleep deprived, your awareness of what your capabilities are goes right out the window. So by the same token, I've built up a kind of a core of people who I know very well, who are going to be caring for me, and they're supervising and watching me. And whilst their role is to poke me and flip me with a taser if I've had a 30-second blackout, it's also that if I've got to a stage where they're starting to see signs where I should stop, that they're kind of bolshy enough to say, Mark, you're going to have to stop now, because I'm going to want to carry on. But they've
just make sure they know the difference between a taser and a revolver.
Political jokes are plenty.
Oh dear. I remember I was doing a radio. It wasn't a marathon. It wasn't an attempt at a world record. I was working down in Maidstone for it's a European classic rock part of Radio Caroline, and a few producers had gone off and presenters had gone off, and I said, look, I'll just keep going until somebody comes in. And I think I've been about 12 hours in to a radio show, and I physically fell asleep without knowing I'd fallen asleep. And it wasn't until the producer come and prodded me and said, we've had about 10 minutes of dead air. I was just thinking about, having people around you, because I'm sure that is a possibility if you were sitting talking, because obviously you're going to be sitting at some points, I'm sure, that you could actually physically fall asleep without being aware that you've actually fallen asleep.
Absolutely, yeah. And we all suffer with micro sleeps. You know, we were talking about those when we where, you know, you're perhaps driven somewhere, and before you know it, you think, I don't remember, I just can't remember going through those traffic lights or past that roundabout. And actually, we all have micro sleeps, which can last anything from fractions of a second to a few seconds. And there is a real danger that I just nod off when, you know, when I'm just not realizing I'm that tired. And I think I'm getting on with it okay, and before I know it, bang, I've gone. That's possible, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing that would concern me, because I was driving from south of Switzerland. I made some ridiculous thing. I decided I was going to go to Switzerland to let the new year in. So I drove all the way to Switzerland, let the new year in with some friends, and then drove all the way back. And there was the last bit was going into Paris. And I think we'd come past about 20 miles from Paris, and then all of a sudden we're on the periphery. And I thought, I don't remember that last 20 miles. I had no recollection of it. It frightened me to death.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? Once you start to realise that those moments are when you've had a micro sleep, it's scary, and you realise how many times I've probably done that. And then you realise how susceptible we all are when we're behind the wheel of, you know, a big lump of metal as a car, and it's really scary.
Okay, Dave, you've got a few listeners' questions there?
Yeah, we have, yes. Let's go over to the first one. A message from Rob in Dallas. Do you have to insure yourself against self-injury, such as your voice? A lot of strain on your voice, I should imagine.
Yeah, so we are talking to some insurance companies about insurance for that very purpose. You know, the numbers, we're still working through the numbers with them. But yeah, that is a concern. I think as far as the likely impacts to me are concerned, I think we've got so much control around it that, you know, absolutely we're erring on the side of caution. And should I really start to struggle, then we'll just pull it and stop if we need to. But yeah, we are working with insurance companies to try and get insurance for me for the event. I don't think it's going to be too ridiculously priced, thankfully, because of all the controls that we've got wrapped around it.
Okay, question from Dublin. Any jokes or any comments about Dublin?
Funnily enough, Dave, yes, I have. Did you know that Dublin is one of the fastest growing cities in Europe?
Really? Why is that?
It keeps doubling every year.
Oh dear. That's worse than one of Andy's jokes, that.
Yeah, I was going to say, hang on, I've got the copyright on terrible jokes around here. How dare you? See, these guests, they think they come in and think they own the place.
But we should point out that Mark will not be doing jokes like that on the during the week.
What's going to happen?
But you know, when delirium sets in after sleep deprivation, who knows what jokes you'll come out with? Maybe Andy will be there to help you.
Yeah.
I could just
So yeah, Jill in Dublin, she asks, how long will it take to recover from the event?
If it's sleep, then actually one of the really things about sleep deprivation is that you can never really get back the sleep that you've lost. So whilst I'm staying awake for, or the event's lasting 140 hours and I'll get 4.5 hours sleep throughout the whole thing, the recommended sleep for that period of time is something like 48, 49 hours, I think, something like that. And I will never be able to get that back, and you never can. You know, if you stay awake for an astronomical event for all night, then you might recover 2 or 3 hours the next night, but you'll never get that sleep back. What will probably happen is that after the whole event, I'll probably have about 9-10 hours sleep the following nights, and probably wake up feeling fairly refreshed. I'll probably feel pretty shattered again the following night, have another 9 or 10 hours sleep, and then after sort of night 3 or 4, my sleep pattern should start to get back to some semblance of normality. So it should only take 3 or 4 days before I get back to it. What we're going to be doing, I mentioned the sleep scientists or the cognition scientists in Cambridge. I'm going to be wearing an EEG machine during the lecture to see what my brain waves are doing, but also I'll be doing the same thing for the 2 nights afterwards to see how my sleep patterns start to recover back to normal.
That's going to be interesting.
Really useful information.
Yeah, science is going to be good. Because I was going to mention the Radcliffe Hospital. We talked before about the circadian rhythm problem that my son has, and he was a patient at the Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, and they actually diagnosed his condition. Prior to that, nobody would take any notice of what he was saying. And it's these signs that what you're going to be producing is evidence or results that will help people.
Yeah, absolutely.
In different ways.
Things, one of the things, there's still so much it's not mysticism, there's so much we don't know about sleep and the purpose of sleep, and there's a lot of health implications to not having a good amount of sleep. To be able to do something, for 5 hours, it's not a major issue to my life, because the issues of sleep deprivation are when it happens for a lot of years, and if you don't get enough sleep night after night after night after night for like 20, 30, 40 years, that's when the impact starts to become quite pronounced for people. It's not going to be a major issue for me, but it's really nice that I'll be able to do something that might advance science a little bit in understanding it.
That'd be a good thing, yeah. Mark in Redruth wants to know, if you do this, and we know you will do, because we're positive all about this, will you be trying to break any other records, any world records?
Not in a hurry, I suspect. I don't know. I think there's
the sleep record, maybe.
There's, interestingly, one thing that Guinness have done is they've actually stopped recognising attempts for breaking the world record for staying awake for the longest period of time, because they recognise the dangers of sleep deprivation. And I think the last record was something like 11 days and 12 hours, something like that, for someone who stayed awake before they fell asleep. And they recognise how dangerous that is when you compare that to Felix Baumgartner, who jumped from a hot air balloon from, however many miles up or kilometres up he was, and he did that and skydived, and yet they won't recognise a sleep deprivation record, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
Shows what the danger is.
I think, is there anything I would do? I don't know. I've seen other records where there's elements around giving the largest astronomy lesson, or the largest stargazing session. I don't know. I might do something like this, but this one for some reason has resonated with me. I don't know why, but it's something that's just resonated with me.
How about the star badge for Scouts, Cubs, Guides, and so on? The biggest number of Guides, Cubs, Rainbows, Boy Scouts, Boy Cubs.
You know what I've been doing for the last 5 months? Is been doing Zoom calls with Scouts and Guides and Cubs, and I've crikey, since all my theatre shows have just died, and I've not done any theatre shows for a good year now. So since October, I think I've done about 300 sessions with Guides and Cubs and Scouts, talking to the stargazing badge.
I've done them obviously in the live form, and it's an amazing thing to do and get people through that. But wonderful. I mean, to do it by Zoom is another way. Yeah, that's not something I've tried, but Okay. What else we got? Linda in Wolverhampton. She just wants to say good luck. I hope it all goes well.
Thanks, Linda.
And the final question that we've got in at the moment: what things are you not allowed to say? This is from John in the Isle of Man. So we know what your aim is, to talk astronomy for 5.5 days. You've got to keep on going. Those gaps that you have got to be limited, otherwise it's classed as a 5-minute rest, isn't it? So what can't you say? What's off topic, or if you drift off topic, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, you as long as it's a well-structured lecture and it's relevant to the lecture, then you can you can talk pretty much about anything. So I don't know, if you're using some sort of crazy analogy, talking about, I don't know, about trains traveling, when you talk about relativity or something like that, that's relevant to the topic of the lecture. So you can talk about things that perhaps you might drift into a little bit for illustrative purposes, but if it's not relevant to the lecture, you can't do it. You can't read straight from a book. You can read excerpts, so small excerpts from a book, that's fine. I couldn't just stand there and read my books that I've written for 5 days. I've got to present a lecture, and there's also rules around repetition as well. So if I repeat a topic within 4 hours, then that's classed as a failure. So whilst I could do a 24-hour lecture and repeat it every day, that doesn't feel like a proper 140-hour lecture to me. So I've decided to go down the route of trying to craft 140 hours worth of content.
Wow.
But if I talk about the Apollo missions, for example, then I can talk about the moon again, as long as it was within or more than 4 hours ago that I last talked about the moon. There's quite an element of juggling around to get the content to work throughout the whole of the event. But there's not a lot that I can't talk about as long as it's relevant to the content of the lecture.
I'm sure it's all going to come together. We're going to go to another break in a moment, Mark. Just before we do, your website, if I've got this correct, www.markthompsonastronomy.com/GWR. Now, I believe you've raised £4,000 already.
Yeah, so it's not quite £4,000, but it's near. It'd be great if we could get it to £4,000 tonight.
Well, I'd like to think by 8 a.m. in the morning.
That would that would go to 4,000. Fantastic.
So where are you at the moment with that money?
I think it's about 3,700. I think. Okay. Something like that. So it's only a couple £100 short, dear listeners. On the website you'll find details of where you can donate money to via the Just Giving system. There's also
Eventbrite.
Eventbrite, that's right. Yeah. Well, that's for the for reserving tickets, but they're not on sale yet until the 1st of June.
Yeah.
There's also details of volunteers as well. We are needing about 100 volunteers who can help with stewarding the event. We need a lot.
I don't think there's going to be any struggle getting volunteers. I certainly don't think so. What I would like to see is basically we're all desperate to meet up, and assuming the lockdown is over and we're legally allowed to mingle and mix up with each other, we can maybe all get down to Norwich or East Anglia and
that's an idea.
Attend this event.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And give you support. If you need us to help out in any way, we'll be there. Yes, and even if it's just we'll shine our laser pen at you to keep you awake or whatever it be. We'll heckle us. We're very good at heckling. Yeah, but I think that'd be a great thing because we've got no Solar Sphere meetup in actual life, but we've got our virtual Solar Sphere. Northwest Astrofest, we'll be doing a virtual Northwest Astrofest as well, but we won't be able to meet up at this moment. But that'd be great come September if we could get together. And there's the astronomical societies out there. Wouldn't it be great if we got all those hotels booked up in the local area and we all took turns throughout over, let's say, a long weekend. That covers like Monday.
Yeah. Well, that sounds a remarkably good idea for you, Dave. There must be something wrong with it.
It is, obviously, It's basically, I've been awake for over 12 hours and I'm having sleep deprivation.
Actually, talking of being awake for 12 hours.
Right, quick, Andy, got to make it a quick one.
Okay, Mark, I was just wondering, before the event, will you be getting any more sleep than normal?
Do you know what? As long as I'm well rested, you can't really build up sleep ahead of events like that. You've got to just make sure you're well rested and then hit the ground running, but you can't build sleep up beforehand to get yourself ahead of the game, unfortunately. Be great if you could, but you can't.
Right. What a shame.
Okay, we're going to go over to a track now. We're going to come back for any final questions for Mark, and then we'll have a quick chat with Andy and the panel about Ingenuity. So I'm going to play this track, and I know there's another one that's kind of in vogue with what we're talking about, and I know Julian will get very, very excited about this one. It's Only When I Sleep by The Cause.
Excellent.
The Cause or the Cars? I thought you said the Cars.
The Cars.
It's funny
that's right. I did that, Cars.
Does anybody remember a song back in the late 70s by a band called Racing Cars called "They Shoot Horses, Don't They"? Yeah. Well, that was. Do you know what that was about? That was actually about the dance marathons that they used to hold in the 1930s in America, where they used to stay awake for days dancing in couples around a dance floor, and that was very popular in the 1930s in America.
There was a film as well, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Wasn't Jane Fonda in that? I think.
Yeah,
Jane Fonda
like
was. I think. Yeah.
And it was about the dances that they used to do, the marathon dances.
Yeah.
And that. So yeah.
So perhaps we could encourage Mark to do the dancing at the same time. It might keep him awake.
Maybe not. You got to bear in mind that thermometer.
Of all the things I can't do in the world, dancing's one of them.
Oh, you're like me, mate. I can't. I've never seen the point of it, to be quite honest. So,
do you know what? You're right. It's one of those things that I think there's either people in the world who want to dance, and then there's people who want to dance and want to make everyone else dance.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I just hate dancing. I've got to be really properly drunk to dance.
Me too.
Properly.
But I've only ever been that drunk once, actually, when I went to see a North African musician and his band in Croydon in London, and that was the only time in my life I ever felt an urge to dance because the music was that danceable. So yeah.
Big hi to Mary. You made it. Hey.
Sorry, last
There.
15.
That's okay. Mate. How's your shadows go? And I don't mean Cliff Richard.
Late. We all got late starting because we were watching the press briefing from obviously. So
Right, instead of
hello.
It's Sonia.
I've not actually spoken to Mary face to face apart from Twitter, so it's really nice to see you face
Oh,
to
I've
face.
seen you at Northwest Astro Fest loads of times.
Oh, yes.
Have we got any last questions coming there, Dave?
We have Sam in Copenhagen. Wonderful, wonderful Copenhagen, isn't it? Yeah. If COVID spikes, will the event be rescheduled?
Yeah, great question, Sam. So very much keeping an eye on the COVID situation at the moment. Given that all I need to have in the audience is one audience member, then we can easily hold the event adhering to COVID social distancing rules. But ultimately, we'll have to apply to Public Health England to get approval to continue if theatre shows are still in that place where they can't carry on. So it's something that are keeping a watching brief on. And if we can carry on with it, then of course we will. But if not, it'll just be rescheduled.
That's great,
Okay.
Mark. Well, Mark, I want to thank you very much for coming in tonight to talk about the world record attempt, and I want to thank Rachel as well for organising this session. Not organising your event. I won't give her the complete thunder.
Oh,
because,
she's very helpful there, though.
Because she's already insulted you once. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to the panel now to have a little bit of a chat about the Ingenuity. We've got 5 minutes left of the show, so I'll have a little bit of chat about Ingenuity. And what I'm going to do is, Mary's just joined the chat, so I'll bring Mary in first. Mary, your thoughts on Ingenuity today? How did you feel about it?
I cried quite a lot. It was just, and tonight I did my Shadows in Space talk, and being able to drop in not only a picture of a helicopter with its shadow stationary, but then a shadow of a helicopter in flight on the surface of another planet. I was like, that's going in my talk tonight. And I still can't quite believe it. It's just incredible. Such an achievement.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand you over now to Andy. He's Astro Radio's resident space expert, although he's called still not a co-host tonight on the Zoom for some reason, although he is a co-host.
I noticed.
I only did that just to ruin your thunder there. So Andy, fill us in on what's going on.
Well, just a very, very brief mention that SpaceX have won the contract to build the lunar lander that's going to put humans back on the moon somewhere, I would guess, around 2025, 2026. SpaceX beat off two competitors to win the competition. NASA were expected to pick two companies, but they didn't have the money. So SpaceX, with their lunar version of their Starship vehicle, is going to put humans back on the moon. And that's absolutely mind-blowing. They've got an incredible lot of technical development ahead of them, Herculean tasks ahead of them, but I'm confident they can do it. That's about it.
Well, you were going to fill us in about some science and Ingenuity. Oh, Mark's waving.
Okay,
Go on.
right. No, the interesting thing about Ingenuity, there's a lot of dust in the Martian atmosphere, and those blades, which rotate at 2,400 RPM, effectively act like a huge Van de Graaff generator with that dust, which potentially is going to create massive static charges, which could knock out the electricity, knock out the electronics on the helicopter. So NASA are going to be keeping a very close eye on the data from its next flights. It's doing 5 flights over the course of the next few weeks. And they're going to very closely monitor whether they've got any dust buildup on the blades of the helicopter, because potentially there will be potential for damage from static electricity.
Mark, you were going to say something?
I was going to ask, did you say it was 2026-ish? You think about the lunar lander from SpaceX?
That would be my guess. I may be wrong, but the target, of course, has been 2024, but they're not going to make that. So
if it is, then it was an hour and 20 minutes ago. We missed it.
Oh God!
You can go off people, you know.
These are the jokes.
Joke.
Or Dublin.
Oh dear.
We just had a question coming from Derek Lupul AS. How come a helicopter and not a quad drone?
Well, it is.
So what I can see is it's a twin blade. So I think that's why the helicopter seems to come about, as opposed to these 4-bladed drones that we see on Earth.
One of the other reasons for that, Dave, is because of the size of the wings, the blades. And if it's a quad, as a typical drone would be that you find in the UK, then the size of the blades would make it massive, because they've got to be 4 corners for it to work. But by putting them one on top of the other, it can keep the footprint of the spacecraft or the craft down a little bit as well.
Yeah, but it's also got a solar panel. Yeah, Andy, it has a solar panel built into it as well.
Yes, on the top there. That's the square thing on the top. Yeah.
And is that fixed or rotating with the blades?
No, that's fixed. That's fixed.
It's fixed. That's okay. I'll just throw that one in there.
This is an interesting question, and this is from Stefan, and he's in Sweden, and he wants to know, why is this classed as the first powered flight on another planet? He says, although it says the moon isn't a planet, but he says on another world. He says, was not the lunar module flying?
But it wasn't on a planet, it was on a moon.
Yeah, but we're all saying on another world. We're saying first flight on another world. He says, was not the lunar module, did it not make a descent and an ascent? Therefore, did it not fly?
Yeah. Armstrong did manually fly it. So.
You can argue the same for the Sky Crane that drops both the rovers down, which is why the US teams specifically say rotorcraft or helicopter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I just thought.
It's very good.
Well, I think if you define flight correctly, it's taking advantage of the atmosphere to give lift on the rotors. And the other forms of propulsion are just simply pushing yourself around with a rocket engine. So it's different.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The Martian atmosphere is very, very thin, isn't it? 1% of Earth.
1%, yeah.
1%, yeah.
Heck of an achievement.
Righto, folks, I want to thank you all for joining the panel. I especially want to thank Mark for coming in on the panel tonight. And Mark knows he's welcome on Astro Radio anytime. He's an old hand at this now. He's been on a few times. And yeah, if we did manage to all meet up, that's an interesting one. If we could all meet up at this event, there is no reason why we couldn't do an outside broadcast of Astro Radio from there. I can't see any reason why we couldn't.
What a great method. What a great support as well.
Yeah.
We'll look into that. We'll look into that. So we're going to leave tonight.
Sorry, Mark, we're coming, mate. That's it.
Fine. I'm already thinking there's plenty of rooms at the university we could find somewhere to put you, so that'd be absolutely fine.
That'd be brilliant.
It sounds like a plan that could come together. This.
Pete, before we go, can we just also mention Mark's Twitter handle as well? Is that right? Twitter handle, Twitter account. What have we got? Sorry, Mark, I'm looking at you. It's astronomer_Mark.
And there's if I can just chip in, there's another one for the world record attempt, which is GWR Lecture.
Yeah. Now, did I get your other one right there? Astronomer_Mark, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm on it now, and I've just signed up for the newsletter. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, so everyone out there,
good luck, Mark.
Support Mark.
Good luck, Mark.
Good luck, Mark.
Good luck, and thank you.
We hope to see you in September, Mark.
Yeah,
I'll see you there. Well, you might. Yeah,
we're going to be there, Andy. Come on.
I might be a bit busy.
I'll definitely fly over for that. I wouldn't miss that. So,
Andy, bring your laser pen with you. We might need that.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being on the panel again tonight. It's been absolutely brilliant here on Astro Radio, and I think we should leave with this track, "Sleeping Satellite," Tasmin Archer.